What happens when you pour a $1 box of cherry Jell-O onto a rotten log and come back 24 hours later? I'll tell you what happened to me. October 2021, a small piece of private land in Breathitt County. That's the deep eastern Kentucky hill country where the hollows are so tight you can hear a deer snap a stick from 3 ridges over. I'd set up a trail camera on a log that had been down for at least 2 seasons, soft enough that you could push your thumb into the bark. Poured 1 box of cherry Jell-O powder across the top. Dry. Didn't mix it with anything. Just tore the packet open and dusted it across the damp wood like seasoning a steak. Walked away and didn't come back until the next evening. The camera had 43 photos. The first deer showed up in under 4 hours. By morning, 3 dozen and a basket-racked 6-pointer had licked the top of that log down to raw wood, and the 6-pointer had pawed the dirt at the base hard enough to scatter soil 2 feet in every direction. That was day 1. I left the camera running without refreshing the Jell-O and came back 10 days later. The hole at the base of that log was 3 feet deep, not 3 feet across, 3 feet straight down. They had excavated through topsoil, through root mat, through clay, licking minerals out of every layer. The log itself was half-eaten. Bark gone, sapwood gouged, chunks ripped off and chewed. I've set out mineral blocks that sat untouched for a week. This log looked like a backhoe had been at it. I didn't come up with this. A taxidermist in Transylvania County, western North Carolina, mentioned it while I was picking up a shoulder mount. Said his best clients had been doing it for years. I spent the next 3 seasons testing it against commercial mineral licks on properties in 3 states, and the results weren't close. Not in the way you'd expect either. The Jell-O setup pulled fewer deer overall, but it pulled deer faster and from further away, and it consistently attracted older age class bucks that ignored the commercial blocks entirely. And near the end, I'll share a temperature trick that changes how the gelatin behaves on the log, one that extends the effective window from 48 hours to nearly a full week. That one detail is the difference between refreshing your site every other day and checking it once before the weekend. Before I walk through the setup, you need to understand what you're competing against and why a box of dessert powder has any business outperforming it. The commercial mineral lick market is dominated by compressed blocks and granular mixes. Products like Trophy Rock, which is a mined mineral deposit from Redmond, Utah, retail for $20 to $25 per block. A block lasts 2 to 4 weeks depending on rainfall and deer traffic. Granular products like Redmond Hunt Mineral Mix or various flavored mineral powders run $15 to $20 per bag. If you're maintaining 2 mineral sites on your property, that's 3 to 4 blocks or bags per season. Call it $75 a year on the low end. Over 15 years of managing mineral sites, that's over $1,100 in mineral products. And these products work. I'm not going to pretend they don't. Trophy Rock in particular has a loyal following for a reason. The mineral profile is broad, the salt content pulls deer reliably, and the block format is convenient. But there's a problem with compressed mineral blocks that nobody on the label explains. A deer's interaction with a block is surface level. It licks the exposed face, gets salt and trace minerals from whatever is dissolving on the surface at that moment, and moves on. The mineral release is slow and consistent, which sounds good until you realize that slow and consistent means the scent signature is also low-grade and constant. A Trophy Rock block puts out a steady, subtle mineral scent that deer within about 80 yards, roughly the length of a school bus parked end-to-end 8 times, will eventually find. Eventually. That word matters. Average response time to a new block placement on the properties I've tracked is 72 to 96 hours before the first camera photo. 3 to 4 days of a $20 block sitting in the woods doing nothing visible. Cherry Jell-O on a rotten log creates a completely different chemical event. Gelatin is a hydrocolloid, which means it absorbs moisture from the air and from the damp wood surface and forms a sticky, semi-dissolved matrix. That matrix does two things a compressed block can't. First, it traps the artificial cherry flavoring compounds, which are volatile organic molecules designed by food chemists to travel through air at concentrations detectable from a significant distance inside a slow-release gel layer. As the gelatin absorbs moisture and gradually dissolves, it releases those flavor volatiles in pulses rather than in one quick burst. A deer's olfactory system is wired to investigate novel scent signatures, and a pulsing cherry signal coming from the woods is about as novel as it gets. Second, and this is the part most people miss, the gelatin matrix pulls minerals out of the decomposing wood and concentrates them on the surface. A log that's been down for 2 or 3 years is already a mineral source. Decomposing cellulose releases calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium as the wood breaks down. Deer already know this. If you've ever found a rotten log in the woods with one end chewed and licked smooth, that wasn't beavers or porcupines. That was deer mining minerals from decaying wood, and they've been doing it for thousands of years before anyone invented a mineral block. The Jell-O doesn't create the mineral attraction. It amplifies a signal the log is already sending, and it adds a long-range curiosity trigger that pulls deer off their normal travel routes from further out than any mineral block I've tested. You've probably walked past a dozen rotten logs on your property and never thought twice about them. Some of them already have subtle lick marks you'd miss unless you were looking. That's the signal. The log is already working. The Jell-O is the megaphone. If you've spent any amount of time checking trail cameras around mineral sites, you've seen the pattern that drives guys crazy. You put out a brand new block, check the camera a week later, and it's nothing but does and small bucks. Meanwhile, the big deer, the one you've got on camera at 2 a.m. every Tuesday, walks within 80 yards of your mineral site and never commits. He scent checks it from the ridge above, catalogs it as the same block that's been there all summer, and keeps moving. You're not attracting the deer you actually want because the signal isn't novel anymore. He's filed it under known and boring. A cherry Jell-O log doesn't have that problem because it's not a familiar scent profile to any deer. It's an investigation trigger, not a maintenance visit. The mineral content of a rotten log varies by tree species, and this matters more than most guys realize. Hardwoods like oak, hickory, sweet gum, and tulip poplar concentrate higher levels of calcium and phosphorus during decomposition than softwoods like pine or cedar. A mid-stage decomposing oak log, the kind where the bark is starting to slough off but the core is still solid, can contain calcium concentrations comparable to some commercial mineral supplements. I learned that from a forestry extension agent in western North Carolina who'd been studying nutrient cycling in Appalachian hardwood stands. She said deer biologists don't talk about it much because there's no product to sell and no grant money in studying free mineral sources. Nobody makes money telling you the answer is already lying on the ground. Setting this up takes about 90 seconds. Find a log that's been down at least 2 years. You want wood that's soft enough to dent with your boot, but not so far gone that it crumbles apart. Press your thumb into the bark. If it sinks about ½ an inch, roughly the depth of your thumbnail, that's the right stage of decomposition. Too hard and there aren't enough minerals being released. Too soft and the surface won't hold the gelatin. Placement relative to your stand matters. You want the log 15 to 25 yards away, close enough for a clean shot, but far enough that a deer working the log isn't directly underneath you where the shot angle is bad. That's about the distance from home plate to the pitcher's mound on a little league field. Position the log so the prevailing wind carries scent away from your approach route and toward known bedding areas or travel corridors. Those are the natural pathways deer use repeatedly to move between bedding and feeding areas. If you don't know where those corridors are, Look for well-worn trails with tracks going in both directions. Pour 1 full box of cherry Jell-O powder, that's the dry mix straight from the packet, not prepared as dessert, across the top surface of the log. Spread it roughly evenly over about 2 feet of length, approximately the width of your shoulders. Don't mix it with water. Don't dissolve it first. The dry powder absorbs ambient moisture from the wood surface and the air, and that slow absorption is what creates the extended release gel matrix. If you pre-dissolve it, you get a sticky puddle that washes off with the first dew. Dry application is the key. I tested this head-to-head with a buddy on his lease in Beaver County, Mississippi. That's the flat delta country between the Yazoo and Mississippi rivers where the hardwood bottoms still hold solid whitetail populations despite the agricultural pressure. We set up 2 sites 400 yards apart, far enough that deer visiting one wouldn't accidentally stumble onto the other. Same timber type, same distance from known bedding. His site got a fresh trophy rock block cracked in half to expose more surface area, which is actually the manufacturer's recommended approach for faster results. My site got 1 box of cherry Jell-O on a sweet gum log that had been down for about 3 years. Both cameras were Leupold RCX units set to 1-minute intervals so we wouldn't miss anything in a burst. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe. We've got more of these coming. After 7 days, we pulled the cards. The Trophy Rock site had its first visit at 68 hours, just under 3 days, and accumulated 19 total deer photos over the week. Mostly does, and 1 young 4-pointer. Typical mineral site traffic. My Jell-O log had its first visit at 3 hours and 40 minutes. Under 4 hours. Total photos over the same week were 31, including 2 bucks that my buddy had never photographed on the property in 3 years of running cameras. One was a 9-pointer with a split brow tine that he ended up killing that November at 22 yards from a stand we hung based on the camera data from this test. The other was a wide 8-pointer that came in at 1:30 in the afternoon, which on that property was unheard of. My buddy had never gotten a daylight buck photo in November outside of the first and last 30 minutes of light. That deer came to the Jell-O log in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, when every other site on the property was dead quiet. Think about that for a second. Same property, same week, same timber type. The only variable was a $1 box of cherry Jell-O versus a $22 mineral block. And the Jell-O outperformed it on first response time by a factor of almost 20. I don't fully understand why the response time difference is that dramatic. My best guess, and a wildlife biologist I talked to at Mississippi State agreed this was plausible, is that the volatile cherry flavor compounds travel further and faster through humid air than the mineral salt scent of a compressed block. A mineral block relies on direct contact moisture to release scent. Gelatin on damp wood is already dissolving and off-gassing from the moment you pour it. In the heavy humidity of the delta, those volatiles may carry a quarter mile or more on a still evening. A buck bedded 300 yards away, about 3 football fields, doesn't need to stumble across the block on a travel route. He smells something unfamiliar, gets curious, and comes to investigate. One mistake guys make with this setup is using the wrong flavor. I've tested cherry, strawberry, grape, and orange across multiple seasons. Cherry outperforms the others by a wide margin, and I think it's because of the specific volatile compounds in artificial cherry flavoring, primarily benzaldehyde, which has a chemical structure similar to compounds found in certain tree barks and wild fruits that deer already associate with food sources. Grape was the worst performer. Nearly identical visit rates to an untreated control log. Strawberry was middling. Orange worked decently in early season but dropped off once natural fruit sources disappeared. Stick with cherry. It's not a preference. It's consistent data across 3 states and 4 seasons. Cherry is also the most common flavor at every grocery store in the country, which means you're never scrambling for a specific brand. A store brand box works identically to the name brand. I've used both. And if you're wondering whether sugar-free Jell-O works, I tested it. It doesn't. The sugar content is part of the attraction, both as a caloric signal and as a food source for the soil bacteria that produce secondary scent compounds as they break the sugar down. Sugar-free Jell-O just sits there like a weird pink dust on a log. The deer looked at it and kept walking. I felt judged. Where this setup will fail you is rain. Gelatin is water-soluble, and a steady rain dissolves the matrix completely within about 20 minutes. All that slow-release chemistry washes off the log and into the soil. You still get some residual attraction from the minerals and sugar that soaked into the wood grain, but the long-range volatile signal is gone. If rain is in the forecast within 24 hours of your planned application, wait. A morning application followed by a dry afternoon and evening gives you the best initial response window. If you wake up to rain the morning after you applied, the setup is compromised and you'll need to reapply once conditions dry out. An oil-based commercial attractant holds up better in wet conditions, so keep a bottle of something like Conquest Evercalm or a similar oil-based scent as your rain backup. Also worth noting that this method operates in a legal gray area depending on your state. Some states prohibit baiting entirely. Others allow mineral supplements but not food-based attractants, and Jell-O contains sugar, which some wildlife agencies classify as a food product. Check your state's regulations before you try this. In Mississippi, mineral sites are legal. In Kentucky, supplemental feeding is prohibited on public land but allowed on private. North Carolina allows it in some counties but not others. Don't assume. Look it up. A citation over a $1 box of Jell-O is not a story you want to tell at deer camp. I said I'd share the temperature detail that extends this from a 2-day setup to a week-long attraction site, and this is the part that made me stop refreshing every other visit. When overnight temperatures drop below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, about the point where you're reaching for a jacket when you step outside before dawn, the gelatin matrix on the log surface firms up instead of continuing to dissolve. During the day when temperatures rise, it softens and releases volatiles. At night when it cools, it sets back up and holds. That daily cycle of softening and firming creates a pulsing scent pattern that repeats every 24 hours. Fresh signal in the afternoon. Quiet overnight. Fresh signal again the next afternoon. Deer that investigate on day 1 come back on day 2 because the signal reappears. In warm early season, above 65 or 70 degrees, roughly the kind of afternoon where you're still in a t-shirt, the gelatin stays semi-liquid all day and loses most of its volatile load within 36 to 48 hours. But once you get into mid-October and nighttime temps are consistently below 50, a single application on a good rotten log produces detectable scent pulses for 5 to 7 days. I've confirmed this with camera data across 2 seasons in both Kentucky and Mississippi. Apply on a Sunday evening, hunt over it the following Saturday morning, and you'll still have active attraction pulling deer into range. That temperature cycle is why fall is the prime window for this setup and why it doesn't work as well as a summer mineral strategy. The science behind it is the same reason Jell-O instructions tell you to refrigerate it. Cold firms the gel. Warmth releases it. You're using weather as your refrigerator. And if you're hunting a late-season property in December where overnight temps are dropping into the low 20s, the gel may firm up too hard and barely release at all during short, cold days. That's when a commercial block or granular mineral actually outperforms the Jell-O, because the salt content keeps it active in colder conditions. Know when to use each one. The cost math on this is hard to argue with. $1 per box, 8 to 10 boxes from early October through late November. That's $10 for an entire season of mineral and scent attraction versus $75 or more in commercial products that take 3 days to get their first visit. This is what turns a cheap trick into a kill spot that lasts from opener to the last day of the season. Once deer dig that initial hole, you've created something that feeds itself. The excavation exposes mineral-rich subsoil that deer return to independent of the Jell-O. Rain fills the hole, dissolves more minerals from the exposed clay and root layer, and creates a muddy mineral slurry that deer drink and lick even between your applications. I've had cameras running on Jell-O logs where I deliberately stopped refreshing for 3 weeks just to see what happened. Deer kept coming, not as many, and not from as far away, but the ones that had already found the hole came back every 2 to 3 days to work the exposed soil. The Jell-O gets them there. The hole keeps them there. By mid-season, that spot is patterned into their daily route, and you've got a kill zone that produces encounters from October through January without spending another dime. My buddy in Bolivar County killed the best buck of his life over a Jell-O log that cost him $1. He sends me a photo of that buck every October. Try this on your property this fall. Pick the best rotten hardwood log you can find, pour 1 box of cherry Jell-O on it during a dry spell, set a camera on it, and leave it alone for a full week. When you pull that card and see the first deer showed up before you even got home, you'll understand why the guys who do this don't bother with mineral blocks anymore. Drop a comment and let me know what state you're in and what species of log you used. Every data point from you guys helps make this better for everyone.